I'm Hugh Monahan. I made Brigador. It's available on Steam right now. Go buy it. Also, rated our podcast. I don't know why I'm here.
Hello guys and welcome back to the episode of Upstairs Rated R Podcast. Right, today I have here with me is Draconus. Draconus has just gone to see Rogue One, the prequel to the prequel, which were the last four, but not the first four of a Star Wars story that follows in line with the last one that Han Solo died in. So it makes no bloody sense. So Drac, tell me about it.
You're still sore about that Han Solo death, huh?
Dude, seriously, don't even fucking go there. It was a cut and paste of all three films into one, and then at the end of it, Han Solo fucking died. I know someone prolific had to die because someone prolific in the first three, the 4, 5, and 6 had to die. So Vader died. But come on now, Han motherfucking Solo. It's Harrison bloody Ford. You can't kill Harrison bloody Ford.
I think you're confusing him with Chuck Norris, but everybody's got to go sooner or later.
The one great equalizer in life is death, mate. Chuck Norris can't escape death. Not even Chuck Norris.
All right, well, moving into Rogue One, it was kind of hard not to watch the movie and feel as if some things were missing. I knew going in that there were going to be no Jedi in the film. I had seen somewhere that the typical Star Wars intro would not be part of this, like the scrolling text, and they said they're not going to have it be part of this or any non-episodic Star Wars film. And it was the first film not to have been scored by John Williams, and you definitely hear and feel that. But still, knowing all of that beforehand, from the moment that the title screen comes up and the music is different than what one normally gets, well, look, I'm not saying it's bad because of these things. I'm not even saying the movie was bad at all. I did genuinely enjoy the movie. But it's like being handed a soda, expecting a Coke and getting a Diet Coke. It's not that it's bad, but you know when you take that first sip, something is different.
Right. Hang on. If I ask for a Coke and someone gives me a Diet Coke, I instantly spit the fucking Diet Coke out because I hate it. The typical Star Wars intro is rolling text, granted. Okay, that is very old school. Thank you, fucking George Lucas. And then obviously it starts like a starry background and pans down to a starship of some sort. That's how every single Star Wars film has started. You're telling me they haven't even done that? It is the oldest, most basic intro ever. They haven't even done that. Good lord. What has Walt Disney done to Star Wars?
Well, they did come out and say that they're going to be handling these one-off films that are not part of the episodic story of Star Wars. They are going to handle them a little bit different. And so I guess in some of the ways that they're doing that is, for instance, the title screen. So, but moving past that, getting into the film itself, after having gone and seen the whole thing, it was a little difficult for me to understand why some of these character arcs in the film seem to come from or go nowhere. The characters themselves, in some cases, did feel underdeveloped. And what I mean by that is some of these characters you're introduced to and that go along with you throughout the entire story seem to have very little development or actual character background to them. There's an Imperial shuttle pilot, carries a message to the rebellion, and he's defected, but yet we never really see what his real motivation is for doing that, other than the simple fact that he's aware of the construction of the Death Star. And as a viewer, that's one of those kind of key pieces of motivation that I really feel I need to understand why he's suddenly willing to turn on the Empire. And I would think that Rebel forces would also need that so they could know whether or not they can trust the information that he's bringing them. I think probably, though, at least with characters that you see in the movie, my biggest disappointment was Saw Gerrera, who's played by Forrest Whitaker. Now, this had nothing to do with Forrest Whitaker himself. Forrest Whitaker is an amazing actor. I've seen some really great stuff that he's done. I think there was a ghost samurai movie he did that was just completely amazing. But where I feel it lacks for him is I really felt they should have used his talents more. He was seen very, very rarely, only a few times in the movie, and the scenes weren't very long themselves. And I just thought his character probably should have been used more to see more of his talents. Now, on the flip side of that, there's a droid in the movie. I think they call him K2, voiced by Alan Tudyk. Probably my favorite character in the film, has the funniest lines in the film. And one thing I think they did that was kind of subtle, but they did really good with this film, they give you the impression, they show you how these humans or other people can feel an attachment to a droid. which in some of the films, especially in the prequel films, kind of left your head scratching when all of a sudden droids are being treated well and given accolades and whatnot, because up until that point, all you see is these people mistreating and talking down to the droids.
Right. So basically what you're saying is it's the typical Hollywood film, basically. Lots of flash, lots of hype, nothing really happens, and all they do is they stick basically a brand name on it. So Star Wars, Star Trek, Die Hard, those sort of stickers over it, and then that's it done. Get some big actor names in there, bit of flash, bit of glitz, a little bit of action. There's no real story behind it. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the Abysmal 7. Oh, 4, 5, and 6 for Abysmal. No, wait, hang on. That was 1, 2, and 3. No, wait. 4, 5, and 6 were good. 1, 2, and 3 were bad. But 4, 5, and 6 were first, and 1, 2, and 3 were 4, 5, and 6, and 7 was last. Yeah. Well done. Good job.
Well, overall, I'd say the film was a good Star Wars film. Yes, it definitely has that kind of Hollywood treatment to it, but it certainly fits into the overall stories that you've seen, with this taking place after the prequels, 1, 2, and 3, and then directly before 4 picks up. And I mean, when I say directly before, the way that the film ends, you literally could be sitting there watching Rogue One, and then put in Episode 4. That is exactly how that it fits into the story arc. It definitely lacked in certain areas, but it was really good in others, like when Darth Vader makes his appearances. I did see online where some people were talking about how the way that he moved or the way that he looked, they weren't impressed with it, but I thought it did a wonderful job of reminding you just how much of a badass he really is. Some of the cameos from other characters, a few completely unexpected, I thought were handled okay, even if it felt like 1 or 2 of those were put in for no real reason other than to just have them show up in the movie. But if I had to give it a rating on a 1 to 10 scale, I'd say it was probably a 7 out of 10. But I enjoyed the movie. I'm sure I'll watch it again. While it certainly could have spent some more time in the writing room finding better ways to develop or explain some of the character motivations, I think one thing that Rogue One did an excellent job of was leaving me wanting more. And maybe that was the real purpose of the film all along.
Fair enough. You give it a biased 7 out of 10, and you might go watch it again. Whereas, for example, I rated Deadpool an 8 out of 10, and I watched it like 4 or 5 times in the cinema. And I laughed every single freaking time, because every time I watched it, there was something new to see. Is that the case with this one? Or is it a case of, okay, once you've seen it, you don't need to go back and rewatch it? Because, to be brutally honest, man, how many times have you seen the original Star Wars 4, 5, and 6? How many times have you actually sat down to watch that, I want to call that saga? I've done that many a weekend, many an evening sometimes. Like, I fancy watching me some Star Wars. I never watch 1, 2, and 3 because I know they're completely crap. So you're telling me Rogue One fits in with 4, yeah?
Certainly. I would definitely watch it again. I know I'll watch it again. Is it something that I would sit and watch a bunch of times over and over? Probably not, and a lot of that has to do because of how much I love watching Star Wars films for the Jedi, and of course they don't play a part in this movie. All right, well, I think that's probably enough for our opinions on Star Wars. Coming up next, we're going to have an interview. I believe it's Bamm and G. They're going to be doing an interview with the lead developer, Hugh, from a game called Brigador, an isometric real-time tactical game we had a chance to check out and have a little bit of fun playing. So stick around. The interview's a little bit long, but I think it's well worth it, so listen up.
Something, Brigador, buy my game, you assholes, because no one else did.
And it's that time of the episode again where we do some interviewing, and I think I have quite a good one this time. From Stellar Jockeys, guys behind the game Brigador, you might have heard me talk about it in the past. We have Hugh Monahan. Say hi, Hugh.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
I hope I didn't mess up your name there.
Nope, quite all right.
And as usual, also, Bamm is rummaging around somewhere here.
Do you mind? I'm busy trying to find some bacon. Hey everyone, what's cracking? Hugh, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
G, what have you lined up for us today? Because right now I'm looking at a Tiberian Sun type of game here, dude. Please tell me, what is Brigador all about?
Well, all I can say is that it's Megs running around stomping on things. I think Hugh is better at explaining it. It's his game after all.
Yeah, so, the quickest way to talk about Brigador is just to call it a Kool-Aid Man simulator. It's old school 90s feel. It's 90s hard, and we do kind of old style sprite graphics. Brigador looks the way you remember those games looking. But yeah, you drive around mechs and tanks, blow stuff up. We do our best to give you a lot of choice as a player and to not waste your time. So configurable vehicles, customizable difficulty. We've got a story campaign and kind of a custom skirmish mode as well. So plenty to chew on.
Yeah, when you say that it looks the way we remember 90s games, very much so. It looks the way I remember Syndicate. It doesn't look the way Syndicate looked, because I've checked. My memory's better than the graphics in Syndicate. But it has that look, and it has all that neon lights and darkness mixed together, the synth music. It has all those things that people my age at least go, oh, I miss that.
Yeah, we weren't actually actively trying to emulate Syndicate or any of these older games. That's just what ended up happening because those are the games that we really loved, and a lot of the design and aesthetics that I think are really appealing about games like Syndicate or Crusader No Remorse were the inspirations for us. And it just so happened that the game we ended up building ended up being fairly close to these original source materials.
Right. Have to disagree with the pair of you. You're both old fogies, yeah? Back in the 90s, where I was just a knee-high to a grasshopper young sprogling, right? I played a game called Red Alert. Loved that game. I still play it. It's now playable in my browser. I got it for free off the interwebs, right? It also reminds me of a game called Tiberian Sun, where you walk around these big old massive mechs in that sort of isometric sort of view. That's what it reminds me of, a combination of Red Alert and Tiberian Sun. Running around, stepping on things, making them go squish. I can't believe I'm disagreeing with the developer what this game looks like. But no, that's what it reminds me of. It looks bloody cool. Yeah, fucking nice. Love it.
Well, cheers. No, I Red Alert and Tiberian Sun are both near and dear to my heart. We had a lot of LANs playing. Red Alert probably got the most traction. We started with Command and Conquer, and then Red Alert. Oh, I'm trying to think of there's an expansion to Red Alert that we played a lot as well. And eventually, yeah, Tiberian Sun and later Red Alert 2 all got plenty of mileage on our end, so I'm not unfamiliar with those games.
I'm racking my brain now. What was the expansion to Red Alert? I want to say Counter-Strike, but I don't know. No, I don't know. Aftermath?
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but...
No, I can't remember off my head either, but Red Alert and Tiberian Sun. I didn't really fancy Red Alert 2. It wasn't really my cup of biscuits, but it looked too cartoony for me. I preferred the Red Alert, Tiberian Sun, and then the Generals, the one that came out after that. A long time after was Generals. Mm-hmm. This game reminds me of the Tiberian Sun / Red Alert, which was something I was looking for a very long time. It was a DLC, I think it was in Red Alert, that you could play as a tank and you ran around the map shooting things. And if you died, you died. That was the end of your experience. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the kind of funny thing with kind of segue into Brigador's development was that it actually originally started as an RTS. And we had kind of done some experiments on that end. And at one point it was more like a lane pusher where you still had direct control of your vehicle, but then you would have either, waves or a series of spawns of both friendly and enemy vehicles, and your goal was to breach some sort of enemy fortress and fight your way through. But what we found is that either we had to make it was going to require so much work on the AI side that the player was just sort of rendered redundant, or you ended up with a game where you have all of these friendly characters around. We really wanted to make sure that everything had friendly fire and that there was kind of collateral damage. The fully destructible environment was something that was kind of very, very early on design tenet with the game. And what ended up happening is that with that kind of lane pusher style, either the player just wasn't important or just everyone was getting in your way to the point where... Because I'm the kind of guy that, I get real precious about all my units when I play games like XCOM. And it was just driving me mad because you weren't able to push your way through without stomping on half of your own guys in the process. So I know for some people that would have been the perfect game. It wasn't quite my cup of tea. So we ended up pivoting over to just direct control of a single unit. And it was just sort of you rampaging through a city. And that, ended up being what Brigador was. And I think it turned out all right.
Well, to be brutally honest, mate, that's what development is mostly like. Develop the game that you want to play, and 9 times out of 10, the game you want to play, a whole lot of other people want to play it as well.
Right, and if I'm going to spend 5 years making it.
Yeah, well, look, the indie development isn't the easiest thing in the world. I mean, we've exclusively interviewed predominantly indie developers, and every single time they tell us indie development is the most hardest thing they've ever had to do, and it takes forever, you know, and some ideas don't come to fruition and whatever have you. But I have a question. Why isn't this on the PS4?
That's a good question. So originally, Brigador was a much tinier game. We wrote our own engine for it, and it was supposed to just be this sort of couple of fresh-faced kids. You know, both the programmers I started working with them when they were still in college. And, I mean, like, the very first draft of a game that we were building together was this 2D pixel art brawler in a single screen. So, like, not even as complicated as something like Smash TV. It was just super, super simple. What happened was we went through all these iterations on the game, and like part of the deal was that the programmers got to write their own engine. And also, I mean, this is back in 2010, 2011, so the landscape for third-party engines was completely different. You know, a lot of people talk to me now, you know, the immediate question is, you know, why the hell would you write your own engine? It's madness. And for someone starting out right now, I would say, yeah, absolutely, you need to be using Unity or UDK. But at the time, there was Unreal Engine 3 and Unity, but Unreal hadn't really... Their terms were much more hostile to independent developers, and Unity just wasn't nearly as fleshed out as it is now. And so, yeah, we rolled our own engine, and what happened was that this was supposed to be like a 6-month project. And each time we got some headway, we realized either, you know, this game is dumb, you know, we couldn't bear to work on whatever the thing we were working on any longer, so we pivoted to something new and something a little bigger, a little more interesting as we got better at developing. And then projects would grow a little bit in size, and ultimately it just came down to we wanted to release a game that we were proud to put our names on, and because we're all really, really afflicted with, I mean, perfectionism is bandied about a lot. I don't think it's exactly the right term. We wanted to be known for making quality products. And that meant that we weren't just going to throw out some tiny little cast-off game just to have a turn at the wheel. We wanted to make sure that, like, the first thing that we released commercially was this major thing. So the end result of that was that we kept iterating. Brigador is actually the 7th game that we cycled through. Like, the Brigador that ended up shipping was the 7th iteration. And that's also partly why it took us 5 years, was we just kept iterating and kind of restarting. And so, long story short, because we'd written our own engine, did it in C++, and done all this stuff from scratch, turns out it's really, really hard. It's hard to do multi-platform development just PC, Mac, Linux. And to do multi-platform development where it's PC, Mac, Linux, PlayStation, or, you know, Xbox, that's an order of magnitude more to deal with. And so it was just too much to juggle, and frankly, it was probably a mistake for us to even do any kind of multi-platform. We probably should have just done PC to begin with and be done with it. But yeah, because we didn't have all these pre-existing tools to work with, we were writing all this stuff from scratch, and so that was just the only option really at hand. And yeah, the fact that we ended up working on it for 5 years instead of 6 months.
You actually touched on something from earlier this year, a game that called Rive from Two Tribes came out with, also a small indie thing. Two Tribes have been putting out games for some years now. And they made the conclusion even, they've always done their own engines and it's just not possible anymore. You can't compete because of where Unity and Unreal is now, as opposed to where it was, 5 years ago.
Yep, I mean, part of it's just how the landscape has changed, and the demands for what you produce have become far more complicated. And and this is a tricky thing where, you know, part of it's like we're getting better tools that are more generalized, that can just allow you to hit the ground running much faster. But also, it's just in a field that is as competitive as it is now, you can't afford to be spending time making engine tech unless you're a really big studio, and even then, that might be a questionable investment, both in terms of time and finances. You know, if we'd released Brigador 2 years ago, it would be a very different situation. But for various reasons, you know, we didn't ship until mid-2016. And by that time, I don't know if you guys have been following Steam Spy, but Sergey announced that a third of all games on Steam are released in 2016. And it's kind of madness right now. Now, you know, as far as the bell curve on kind of quality release goes, you know, a lot of those games, a lot of that acceleration in how many games are being released, a lot of that is kind of lower end tier stuff so that you're not necessarily competing with them directly. But what happens is they flood the market, and the signal to noise ratio has gotten much worse. And so, whereas before simply being on Steam used to in and of itself be a sufficient form of marketing, like that just getting on Steam was a thing of note. You could guarantee that people were going to see it, and that, like I remember in the earlier days of Steam, like when a new game got released on Steam, it was like, oh, like what is this game? I will look at it and, tell my friends about it if it's good or bad or whatever. But like you were guaranteed that like a pretty significant portion of that audience was going to get eyes on. Now, there are ways you when you release a game on Steam, you're guaranteed a certain volume of visibility, not necessarily clicks, but like it's going to be on a page that people will see when they open Steam. But you run through that volume within a day. And then if you're not picking up sales, you just disappear into, back of the store oblivion. And so there's a lot of other things you got to line up in order to really make a release work. And that's something that, part of that's just an experience thing from running an own studio. Like I went straight into developing Brigador without having had any AAA experience. And that's a whole different story. But the point being that there were a lot of pitfalls with releasing a game on Steam, especially releasing when we did, that without access to either someone who had done that already and who was advising us in a direct capacity, or without having done it ourselves, there was just no way to know the types of issues we were going to encounter.
Yeah, just to add some numbers to some of that. Last year, a little after summer, Steam came out and was quite proud that they've hit 6,000 games. And right now, they're almost at 12,000. The last almost 6,000 has come out in about last 14 months. So it's insane. Just the amount of games per day is ridiculous nowadays.
Yeah, and that's so an interesting thing you're seeing right now. Obviously there's a lot of talk about VR and the recent kind of kerfuffle about Arizona Sunshine, and with VR exclusives, with kind of what is considered to be kosher for how you distribute content, and what are acceptable exclusives and things on the VR platform. It's interesting because right now, from an independent developer standpoint, indies are the only people who can realistically afford to develop for VR right now, just because the market is not large enough yet to support AAA development. That might change soon, and I know for a fact that there are some AAA developers who are working in VR right now, but you're probably not going to see big titles coming for a while yet. But VR is interesting because it's tremendously risky in that the audience size is much smaller. But as of right now, I think there's only like 1,000 games for VR. You've got a boatload of people kind of sprinting to develop and release stuff for it. But it's the risk from a reduced market size is mitigated by the fact that your visibility, or at least potential visibility, is far better because you're not competing with AAA, and the actual share of games that are on VR is much smaller. And on top of that, unlike consoles and PC, just kind of regular titles right now, the genres and the idea of what the possibility space is hasn't metastasized yet. So like people don't really know yet what the genres of VR should be. And like we're treading through established sets, like there's plenty of guns shooting things, right? So like first person in some aspect has been shown to work. Still figuring out issues with like locomotion, but for example, Onward I think is probably one of the best examples of a shooter on VR right now, and that's still fairly bare bones and made by an indie team. But that's why VR is an interesting space, because it's one of the only times right now, for as bad as you can say things are getting from a visibility and noise standpoint, it's one of the only places where you can go to actually have a little bit of breathing room.
Looking at the VR, we see things like Insomniac Games, which is a AAA studio, putting out things like The Unspoken. That's really just them testing the water. So it isn't that none of them are doing anything, but that one, CCP's Gunjack, is just saying, yeah, we can do things in VR, but we're taking it very slowly. Because there's 1.2 million headsets out there, as opposed to 50 million PlayStations, a couple 100 million Windows PCs. So yeah, it's a much smaller market, but as you say, easier to show up in when you're an indie because fewer games as well.
Yep.
Okay, just to break that down for you guys that are listening, basically, what Hugh's just gone ahead and said in a very, very long-winded chat with G is that, sorry to phrase it like that, but it was a very interesting little sidetrack there, to be honest. And just to break it down into sort of edible chunks for other people's grey matter, it's basically a case of Brigador went through 7 iterations, and you guys weren't necessarily happy with it. 7 iterations in 5 years, so that you guys could put your name to it and be proud of shipping a quality product. The problem with it taking so long is that it got launched in 2016, which was unfortunately the needle in the haystack. You know, you've got to you've got to wait for the cream to rise above the stank and then get that cream on top of that cream and then play it. And unfortunately, Brigador has been lost in the ether, which is a bit sad, really, because this is a fucking cool game. I want to run around as a mech and blow things up. Yeah, stop being a stealth mech. I want to be the guy that blows the whole freaking city apart. That's a pretty cool mech.
Yeah, I mean that's a succinct way of summing it up. And also, I will monologue like a cartoon villain. So if feel free to interject at any time. Otherwise, I will keep talking. But with one of the other issues with Brigador was that we specifically wanted to make something that was different. And the problem, and that's great, but the problem there is that different means iterations, and iterations mean time and money. Like you can't, if you genuinely want to innovate on a form, you have to do stuff that other people haven't done, and that means that you don't have any guideposts to work from. Like if we were just going to be like, okay, we're going to do twin stick but X, then we could have done Brigador even with writing our own engine. We could have done that in 2-3 years. But because it was specifically that we're going to make a game that's got complete destructibility in a meaningful way, and we're going to design the game from the ground up around that. On top of that, we're going to do this funky 3D isometric aiming scheme that no one else has done either, so we're gonna have to figure out how that works, and we don't even know if it is gonna work. So if it doesn't, then maybe we gotta try something else. It took us 2 years to really nail down that aim scheme. We did a bunch of different reticles and different ways of calculating the physics, and so doing all those different things, and this is where it's interesting, because a common refrain you hear from gamers is that designers should never be afraid to innovate. It's a nice platitude, but in reality, what happens is if you make something genuinely different, oftentimes it's very hard to get people to pick it up because people like what's familiar. So I think that's one of the reasons why the format of X plus some variation, right? Where it's like, okay, BioShock is like, this plus this, or these ways of just combining, of amalgamating existing forms to create something that's kind of new. That's why you see so much of that, just because that is the most expedient way to change things up. And games are so expensive and so time intensive to produce that oftentimes, realistically, that's the way you should operate if you want to make money. And so if you're trying to make games that are interesting because you love games, I'm running a business, so I got to feed people too. So I still have to have those business considerations, but we're all in it for making interesting stuff, not for the money. And the problem is that you can't really sell that.
Believe it or not, I actually do appreciate what you're trying to say here. I do appreciate it. You didn't want to launch a product, a game, that you put your fucking heart and soul and bled for out there, that it basically didn't play well. And ultimately, that is the one thing I think developers are shit scared of, if a game doesn't play well. So taking 2 years to nail down an aim scheme, fucking fair play, fucking well done. Shit, I wouldn't know how to do that stuff. So yeah, if the game looks like it plays well, I actually might purchase a PC just to go and get this game, because I'm in the market for a new PC. So yeah, I'm probably going to play Brigador the first time ever. But believe it or not, you are right. Gamers do like the familiar. They don't like what's new. So doing something that's completely original, this isometric view that you've got, and again, it reminds me of Red Alert 2 / Tiberian Sun, is very different. You don't see games like this. I haven't seen games like this since the 90s. And I miss the 90s games. I really do. So yeah, I do appreciate it. I do appreciate what you're saying, mate. Really, I do.
Hugh, if I may, just for example, on the aiming scheme, I've been playing a few twin stick shooters. The one I mentioned earlier, Reeve, is one of them. I actually like the work you put into it. it's different and it's difficult as hell, particularly because I'm not used to playing with mice. I'm used to playing with controllers. Having to aim in this actual sort of 3D in the isometric world that you have to, in some cases, aim behind enemies. You have to take consideration shooting over things. It's enough of a variation that it makes the game itself interesting, as opposed to just being yet another twin-stick shooter.
Agreed.
Yeah, and we took it on the chin because, and this was a genuine mistake I made with launch, which is that we designed the game around mouse and keyboard with a tank-style control scheme. So tank controls being that for pressing forward, or in our case W, has the vehicle move forward based on its orientation, not up on the screen, which is a standard twin-stick style. So it's the technical terms are screen relative versus screen absolute. So a twin-stick style control scheme is known as screen absolute, which is that up is up on the screen, down is down, and your vehicle automatically reorients based on the desired direction of movement. Tank controls, or screen relative, means that movement is based on the orientation of your vehicle. It's relative to where you're pointing. And that's what the game is built for. It's what it's designed around. And we actually had a functioning screen absolute version of the controls prior to launch, and I nixed it. Because in my mind, I didn't want to trap players with an inferior control scheme, a control scheme the game wasn't designed for, that put a hard cap on how well they could play. And it turns out this was totally specious logic, because the vast majority of players never make it past like the first hour of your game. If you look at a graph of playtime for your user base, it's just a giant asymptote. Once you move past 1, especially 2 hours, the number of people who actually stick with the game, like you're talking less than 10%. And so what happened with Brigador, and this I think was amongst many other factors, but it was a major component that deflated our launch sales, is that we were orienting everything towards a player or a type of player who is in the 90th percentile of the people who buy these kinds of games. And as a result, a lot of these players who came in found the game difficult, and on top of that, Brigador has a triple whammy of being a difficult game with an unusual control scheme and novel gameplay mechanics. So there's 3 major things you have to deal with as a new player, and normally just having one of those is enough to push people away unless you're really good about tutorializing it and easing those players in. Well, we had 3 major things. It could have been just 2 if I had not made that poor decision. And frankly, we didn't do a good job with the tutorialization. It was just too much information, too fast, and we just didn't have the iterations on the tutorials that we needed to really cater to the average player. And that was another thing that just comes with experience as a developer, is that I grossly overestimated the skill of the average player, by an order of magnitude. And so a bunch of people tried the game and just bounced off completely. Just think of a bullet hitting water and then just shooting off into space. Because we didn't handle that initial experience correctly. And so that's where, for as much as I might complain about external factors that did not make our launch easy, there were also ones that were internal, almost entirely my fault, that really complicated things. And that's one of the reasons why I've tried to be so vocal about this stuff. And I'm giving a talk at GDC 2017 on exactly this, because there was some stuff that was outside of our control, but there's plenty that was within our control. We just didn't know any better. And if I can help from 2 years in the future, a person like me, but starting later, to prevent them from making those same kinds of mistakes, then well, that's great, because it nearly sank us. We managed to stay afloat so far, but it was a really close thing for a while.
Well, I'm gonna look back. We did the review of a game a couple of months ago, and one of the things you mentioned, things like screen absolute movement, it's actually one thing I put in my review, saying if you're playing this game, particularly on a controller, turn that on. Now that you put it back in, it helps a lot, at least for people like me. And that people bounce away from it, I saw personally, because I've thrown the game then to one of our guys who does recording for us. My computer is a Mac, so no recording there. And he said, yeah, it wasn't a bad game, it was just too much for him. It was too much work to get into the game, it was too much dealing with it. And it was, if you look at the footage that's going to be underlaid on the YouTube for this interview, it's early gameplay, and it's Drag fumbling around because he's just a little bit overwhelmed at the time. Me, I took the point, first time I tried it, this is difficult, I'll come back later. And the second time was just, I want to make this work because this looks fun. This has to be fun, there must be fun in here. And there is fun, except fun really quickly becomes exploded mech. Just saying.
Yeah. And that's where, like, again, that's kind of experience component to it. And we have been working to address that since launch. Like, I don't want to make it sound like, here's all the shit we did wrong, and then we're sitting on our thumbs since then. So, like, we added in these alternate control schemes. We've added full controller support. We also, and I'm really proud of this. So at Indie PopCon, we showed the game. This was end of June, so like right after we'd launched. And I met with a wonderful guy who works at, he's part of Able Gamers. So they focus on accessibility in games for people with various types of disability. And we were kind of brainstorming on ways that we could make Brigador more accessible. And part of that was just UI and dealing with like red-green colorblind. Part of that was getting in controller support and fully rebindable keys. That is something we launched with, was fully rebindable. And, because that, depending on your control interface or kind of issues you're dealing with. But the big one was just that, so we have scalable difficulty outside of the campaign. The problem was that some people, like, depending on what impairments you're dealing with, real-time games just aren't an option. You can't interact fast enough, which is a shame in a lot of cases, because that you're preventing players who would love to be part of this game from being able to play it. And so what we realized is that if we just added a time scaler to the game, we could make it, not necessarily make it playable for everyone, but we could significantly increase the number of players who have to deal with these kinds of issues. We could significantly increase the number of them for whom Brigador would then be playable. And a side effect of that was that slowing down the game also functions as an overt way of augmenting the difficulty. And so suddenly we're like, okay, we got controller support in. It's not the best, because, again, the game just wasn't designed around that control scheme. But if you slow the game down to like 75, 80%, that helps compensate. And if you're having, a lot of trouble with the game, well, hey, try slowing it down to 60, 65%. And suddenly we got a bunch of feedback when we finally added this feature, because there are all these players who came back to the game for whom suddenly the game finally clicked. And eventually, some players just like playing it at 60% speed, and like that's their jam. But then there were other players for whom playing at that reduced speed was essentially the tutorialization that we failed to give them in the first place, and it allowed them to learn the game in an enjoyable fashion and then eventually speed it up to full speed. And that was just something that I never would have guessed going in, that that's a feature that I never would have come to without talking to Able Gamers. And it's one that just substantially improves the game for everybody. And that's like, if there's one feather in my cap for Brigador's development, that's a big one.
Well, I can jump in there and just say, personally, not something I really deal a lot with on the podcast, but I suffer from a neurological condition that makes motor skills difficult, which is one of the reasons I don't use mouse keyboard. Setting it down to 80% actually makes it a lot easier, because that means I can take more time to be focused on the movement of hands and fingers. I know it sounds weird, but a lot of what we do when we play games is motor memory. But you have to build up that motor memory, and particularly in a different game, in a new game, slowing it down helps. And I was kind of amazed to see how much it helped me, just wrapping the part of my brain that handles my hands around the game. It's a really big step, and I was impressed with it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that I was able to provide that, because and it's stuff that when you're not dealing with it directly, you don't think about it. And that's just, I was glad that there was someone to inform me about some of this stuff, because it's something now that, like, I'm going to bring with me to all future games that I work on, because now, like, this is something I've been exposed to. I have begun to understand the things involved better and how, from a fundamental standpoint on design, I can compensate for those things. It's also why, like, I think it's a real shame that a lot of games right now don't have cheats embedded in the game. It's no longer, it used to be a fundamental component of gaming culture, was that there were secret codes, or, you know, IDDKD or Doom, that you had the Konami code. You had all these other ways to enable players to kind of break the game or interact with it in a non-standard fashion. It's the reason why we left all the dev tools in. Like, if you press F1 in Brigador, you can drag out this window that's got like God mode, a dev mode that allows you to teleport and like futz with the map options. There's infinite ammo. There's all these different things that we used for development, but which, like, you know, when I first started playing Doom, I was rubbish at video games, and sometimes you just want to run around and kill stuff and play with all the cool guns, and Doom had those cheat codes, and so I learned them and I started using them all the time, and it was really cool. And that's another kind of aspect of games that I hope to always bring when I work on projects, because that I think you're unnecessarily limiting player enjoyment and how players can interact with your game if you don't leave those kinds of tools in.
No, I do remember the old days where, you know, cheat codes was just part of the experience and part of learning the game. So yeah, definitely. I did not actually know you could just press F1. I hadn't actually tried that. Guess I have to go back and give it a small go.
Yeah, and that's so I'm working right now on a guide that we're going to publish that's just like, here's how you break the game, here's how you do all this stuff, and eventually how you mod it as well. Like, there's some issues we got to figure out on the data loading side, but I would love to get it to the point where players can make their own levels and vehicle data and stuff and share it with each other, you know, because that kind of stuff is really important for sort of long tail for a game's lifespan.
Okay, to touch on some of the other topics, the first time I found out about this game was on Imgur, where you posted a relatively famous post showing pictures of you when you started development and more recently. I don't know if it's the beard, but something has happened physically.
Seen shit, man.
Yeah, all that time, as you said, yeah, it's raising its 5 years, and then you come out, and as you point out, it wasn't necessarily the best release for various reasons. So one of the first questions I would ask, as an indie, did you use any PR company or?
Oh yeah, we spent over 10 grand. Yeah, we worked with a PR company. For 2 years prior to launch, we attended stuff like Penny Arcade Expo, GDC. We showed at multiple major conventions. It's like we did our due diligence there. Part of the issue is I grossly underestimated how powerful being partnered with a publisher is. Part of that is just, if you're with a publisher, they're showing your game at like every single major convention, whether you're there or not. And having a larger publisher, not necessarily like a big publisher, but like you look at cases like Devolver or Adult Swim, they're established entities, and they are entities that have relationships with press. For us, only one member of the team had actually like worked in game dev prior to Brigador, and even then, it was my brother who was working as a level designer. He was the design lead, but he wasn't doing any outward-facing work. So like he wasn't talking to press. So like we didn't have any context on that side. So we were having to essentially build a reputation from scratch, and through that try and get people to pay attention to us and to look at the game. And when you're for all intents and purposes, a random asshole compared to these established companies or publishers, it's very hard to get anyone to listen to you. And that's just like there's nothing like evil going on there. People aren't like trying to ignore you. It's just the reality of, games journalists have to deal with similar kinds of signal to noise ratios, especially as the number of games has exploded. And so if you don't have someone else to do this kind of volume amplification for you to get someone to pay attention, you either have to be really damn good at that yourself, or you've got to have something to show that's got like a major wow factor. And like our initial trailer back in February 2014 actually did really well. It's gotten over 100,000 views. And like we did like 60,000 views in the first 2 days when it launched. So like that was, as far as like indie trailers go, especially being a no-name up to that point, like that was huge.
That was pretty good.
But then we weren't able to really capitalize on that. And by the time we actually released the game 2 years later, no one cared anymore because there was so much stuff that had come since then. And a lot of the people who were sort of the movers and shakers who helped us get all that attention the first time around didn't end up following through when the game actually launched. So, like, you know, there was nothing really, we didn't really gain any traction from it.
There lies an issue that I find a lot of indie devs kind of, they miss it because you can do that with one video that gets a lot of traction. You can do a lot of short-term noise, but once you have that, you actually need to keep making noise. It isn't, oh, we succeeded, we can come back in a year's time. Now you have to constantly put out new information. You have to keep people interested.
Yeah, and you know, a common marketing aphorism is that, you know, you have to expose someone to your content, I think like 5 times before they have any real retention. You know, and the same holds true for games. So like as a developer, you got to beat people over the head with your game in order to even get them to remember it. Like getting them to like it is a whole other battle. But it's just like getting them to remember the name of the thing that you made, which is like your first step, because, you know, if they remember the name of it, then it's searchable, then, you know, you can go from there. But, you know, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard job, and we worked really hard on it, but we didn't do a good job. It wasn't for lack of effort, but it was, you know, just a combination of lack of experience and just didn't have the right resources to really follow through in a meaningful way.
But you did manage to cut through some of the noise at least once, because you threw a response back at someone on the forums about the cost of a game. That did seem to get some attention.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is the price post. So back in March of 2016, so this was after the game had been in early access for 6 months, there's just this guy who posted on a forum, it's like, hey, why isn't this game $15? And I was like, okay, shit poster, fine. Ignored him. But then he just he kept posting. And even that, like, I could have ignored that, except for the part that, like, I think he was genuinely confused and insulted that I hadn't taken his advice and lowered the price from 20 to 15. And so, you know, it was just one night, and I was a couple beers in, and I hammered out this response that was basically just a really long-winded fuck you, and then realized that maybe I should sit on that before posting it. So ended up rewriting it. It was just like, you know, because at the end of the day, a lot of why people are disgruntled about something is because they don't understand why things are done the way they are. You know, a lot of this stuff going around with VR right now, about people getting ticked at Arizona Sunshine developers and a lot of these other games, and like, why are all these developers doing timed exclusives, etc. It's because, unfortunately, the games industry, even more so than film or television or any of these other things, is actually really opaque. And we haven't done a good job of showing people, you know, what it takes to make games, why it's hard, why it's expensive. You know, and like if you look at the Skullgirls post way back when they said that making a new Skullgirls character is going to cost $150,000. And people like went apeshit over that. Even though like they very clearly articulated, here's all the work that goes into this. You got to do the animation, there's concepting, there's voice acting, there's balancing, you know, you got to design all the moves, blah, blah, blah. You know, and they painted this clear picture, and like Kickstarters have been having a problem with this for years, where, you know, developers try to articulate, okay, here's where all this money is going to go, and people are like, you know, $100,000 to make a game, that's like way too much, you're crazy. When actually, like, if you've got 3 or 4 people, you can blow through $100,000 in a spookily short amount of time. So yeah, so I with that Steam post, it was just like, okay, rather than just turning this into a big angry explosion, why don't I try to articulate in a hopefully humorous fashion kind of where these decisions came from and why I think, no, you should pay $20 for this game. And the asterisk on that is that, yes, you can wait until a game goes on sale, and that's fine. You know, if you buy my game, I will be happy that you bought my game at whatever the price. But the asterisk there is that games cost money to make, and if you want developers to take risks, you have to pay them for it. Like, people aren't going to do things if it's not worthwhile. Like, I already kind of did Brigador's development, like, there's a lot of cool stuff that we did, and it was great, but, like, it was also awful. we lived together. We did the Hacker House thing, which sounds fun, but it's mostly not, because it's just you and a couple of dudes, and you just stare at each other for years, and you eat ramen and drink really cheap beer. Like that's your life. That was my life from like 2013 to 2016. And I'm very close friends with those guys, and it was a very good bonding experience, but it's something I never want to repeat. So yeah, I'm glad that post got traction, and it got us noticed by a lot of people who never would have even cared in the first place. There's a really funny video from I'm forgetting. It's one of the outlets on Rooster Teeth, but they talked about because Jane Ning. I'm not pronouncing her last name right, but Jane she's the artist from Firewatch. They had that whole thing about people returning the game because they could play through it in less than 2 hours. And that was a couple months prior to my post. So they were covering those two things. And in the video, the host, she just goes like, oh, Firewatch, and then this game, Brigador, which I've never even heard of. What's Brigador? Like, there isn't even like an entire aside on the video, and like I kind of threw my hands up and silently wept.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, it's legitimately funny. And so that was, I don't know, like that's the kind of stuff you got to deal with. And I think we've done well just through being honest about this kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, that's all you really can do. Like life's too short to just spit vitriol on the internet, even if that can, I never want to build a reputation for, selling games by shit posting, So it kind of goes hand in hand with wanting to be known for making quality games that are relatively unique. And so I would like to have a kind of cohesive approach kind of throughout my life in that regard.
Oh, fair enough. I do have to ask one question. Feel free to tell me to F off or anything. And don't give me numbers, just, rough feelings. Since, as I mentioned, I learned about your game on Imager as opposed to all the other sources that you should normally learn about games on. Did that at least result in some sales? Did the Imager or Ingurians, or however they call themselves, at least come out and force and support you?
So between that Steam post, the Imager post, and a interview I did with Kotaku about that Imager post, as of right now, those three things account for about 25% of our revenue. So yes, they came out in force. And in fact, up until a recent Steam sale, our largest sales spike was from that Imager post. So yeah, people came out in droves. And it that one thing is what made a really, really shitty launch and a really, probably the worst month of my life that I've had in a long time, made it less bad. Because there were a lot of people who came out who were very supportive, and I got a lot of nice emails and messages as well, and that was very touching. And I'm not trying to be overly maudlin about this. It was as I if you read the post, I was in a bit rough shape around that time, and it was kind of like me throwing up my hands in exasperation, because I just didn't really know where else to turn, because a game launch is supposed to be this sort of triumphant thing, and it turned out to be like the nadir of a 5-year cycle of development. So that was it took a long time to recover from that. So yeah, I mean, going viral, it has a noticeable impact on sales, and those are all people buying the game at full price too. So that was up until those Steam sales, it was our highest sales by volume as well as revenue. And so yeah, I'm always going to be thankful for that and for how people followed through with it.
Yeah, I saw the post and it was just immediately, I want to hear more about this story, and I sent you that message and say, come on, and okay, took me 6 months to get you on, but here you are.
Yeah, and that's partly my fault. We played phone tag for a while there, but glad you finally got me on.
So, okay, you mentioned you were sitting in a room with another guy, basically developing the game, eating ramen, having cheap beer, and you were in the US. I don't even want to know what cheap beer it is over there. Yikes. Disclaimer, I'm in Belgium, so I might be a bit of a snob when it comes to beer. Oh,
you lucky bastard.
Yeah, try living here. How do you then go from, a guy sitting in a room, not necessarily cleaning up all the ramen bowls, to, you picked up a writer, Bradley Buckmaster. You got on with Makeup And Vanity Set, who makes awesome music, awesome sounds. That whole thing they put together of synth music and everything is just pretty cool. How do you go from just the two of you or three of you sitting on a couch to getting a writer in, getting an actual book that can be bought on Amazon right now, getting it made as an audiobook, getting literally the game music out on vinyl. There seems to be a big step between those two.
I mean, the reality is that eating ramen and all living together is how we were able to do that. So I live in Champaign, Illinois, and that's where the majority of the team was located. We, at one point, lived in a house together, and later in a 2-bedroom apartment together, which was also the office. So for, several years, my living room had 9 computers in it, and at any given time, there was at least 2 people there working, usually, and even at, the most ungodly hours. And we kept our cost of living insanely low because, we couldn't afford an office, or, the money, if we could have afforded an office, we would have rather have been spending that money making the game better and doing these other value adds because we wanted this thing to be a tremendous cohesive product. So, there's never a point where we sat down and said, okay, either we get a really awesome soundtrack or we get it be in an office. It wasn't an overt decision, but it was from the very start, we knew that we were going to have to approach development from this extremely frugal vantage. And by actually following through with that, that was how we were able to go out on a limb and do these kinds of things. So with Brad Buckmaster, we met him because he's a friend of my brother's. So my brother, Jack Monahan, did all the art and a lot of the level design on Brigador. He maintained a design blog called Design Reboot for several years and built a small community around that. He was doing this very, very articulate design writing. And what happened is that people were, not only responding to these posts, but wanted to continue the conversation. And Brad was one of those guys who, he's a fascinating character. He's from England, served abroad in the military for several tours in Afghanistan and elsewhere. So he's the real deal. And somewhere along that line, he's always been interested in video games. He's a big Warhammer 40K guy. Loves Dread in 2000 AD. But anyway, he started writing. And he did, while he was basically consulting with us, just out of being, a good friend. He was basically our military consultant to kind of help us make a lot of the vehicle designs and some of the writing seem more authentic. And around the same time, he had written a couple novellas that we found out about. We were like, he mentioned it sort of offhand, so we read them and absolutely loved them. They're called the Contractor books. If you click on Brad Buckmaster under Brigador on Amazon, you can find his other stuff. But anyway, we loved those other ones that he did, and so kind of it naturally evolved into, well, why don't you help us with the actual writing on the game? And then that evolved into, because we wanted Brigador to be very pure as far as a mechanical standpoint. We wanted to be a game about you blowing shit up, and the story was going to be there's a lot of storytelling in the game, but we wanted to approach it from a Dark Souls style perspective where it's environmental storytelling, and it's storytelling that is sort of embedded in the descriptions and sort of narrative of all the elements within the game, rather than having this explicit linear and then Captain Monroe did this, and then this thing blew up, and you played this part of it. We offloaded all of that overt storytelling into the book. And so Brad wrote the book. He banged that thing out in 8 months, which is insane, given it's 75,000 words. So it's a 200-page paperback that he did in less than a year. And we loved it. So we edited it, got the book itself polished up, and then we realized, well, the problem is that no one reads video game books. It's just rightly so, they have this reputation as being rubbish. And so the only way we're we're really passionate about this thing, about this work that he did, and we want people to experience it. So the only way we see that we can actually get people to pay attention would be to do an audiobook. And so it's all right, well, we made the necessary arrangements and kind of shifted budget around to also afford doing an audiobook. And we found, and Ryan Cooper was a fabulous collaborator on that. He, because we didn't really have a proper budget for it, but we came to equitable terms, and he did a terrific job with that. And so all of a sudden now we've got this great game with this great book and a great audiobook with it. And it was funny because PC Gamer covered it, but for the most part, no one really talked about it just because no one really knew what to do with it. We're the first audiobook on Steam, but like you can't really search for audiobooks on Steam, or because they're not going to design a custom search entry for a single item on Steam.
I actually had that problem because I got it with the audiobook, and then when I was doing the review, I also had to review the audiobook, of course, or at least listen to it, and going, where the heck is the audiobook? And had to search through my computer to find the bloody audiobook.
Yeah, it's because a lot of people don't even notice the toggle in Steam to switch from your games library to your music library. So, we went through all kinds of issues, and, if they might have been mitigated if we were a higher profile title, but we definitely overreached with Brigador with all this stuff that we did. And to swing it over to Matt Pusty with Makeup and Vanity Set, I can't take any credit for that. What literally happened was I went to GDC, met some cool dudes, we chatted, and I was loudly bemoaning that we could not find someone who could do John Carpenter style synth music. And there was this guy, John Walensky, who was like, oh no, I got a buddy who's in the music biz who knows this stuff. So he introduced me to his friend, and then his friend was like, I've got your musician for you. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, no. You can literally stop searching right now. I'll get you in touch. There's this guy named Matt Pusty. You'll love him. And sure enough, we had him do a demo track, and immediately it was just like, yeah, this is it. Over a 2-year collaboration with Matt, the only note we ever gave him was to just keep going. I didn't we never had to tell him to change anything. Everything he produced, we gave him the book, we gave him the early version of the game. My brother toys with he's an amateur musician, so he had done a kind of a synth style track in the tone of what we wanted. We just handed that all over to him and gave him sort of the synopsis of the game and the factions and everything. And from that, he single-handedly produced the entire audioscape of Brigador, and it was perfect. And now it's a permanent association in my mind between his music and the game. And frankly, I think a lot of people were more excited about and enjoy more his music than the game, which, might be a little frustrating, but I can't get mad about that. And he's the one who arranged for the vinyl and a lot of this other stuff. So it was nice to have some kind of help on the marketing side from there. But I was also very happy to be able to kind of help raise his profile as well, because he did 2.5 hours of music for us. So that was a huge contract for him, and it allowed him to just block out a solid chunk of time to just make the music that he wanted to make anyway. So it was a delightful collaboration.
Well, I would say the music works well, and please don't take this the wrong way, but play the game, see the graphics, and then listen to the music. You can close your eyes and immediately you're in a late 80s, early 90s kids TV show.
I disagree there, G. Disagree there. You listen to the music whilst playing the game, and you immediately get transported to Red Alert. I keep bringing that bloody game up because it reminds me so much of it. And also, I can't believe Hugh said rubbish. I can't believe he used the word rubbish. Well done, sir. Well done.
Cheers. I've done my fair share of travel, so I've picked up some of the more fun vocabulary that's less common here.
Okay, slight question. This is only because Eben, who's our audio guy, asked me to dig into the audiobooks and the books, because don't take it the wrong way, I couldn't listen to the audiobooks. The way they're recorded, if you do a follow-up, please add more spacing and more tonal variation when you change between characters and chapters and segments. It's a little bit of a run-on in the current audiobooks, but I handed them off to Eben, who's used to listening to them. He listened to them in his little smart car for hours, apparently. Really loved them. As he said, who doesn't love mech on mech violence? The world is awesome. All the work you put into building this world. Okay, I don't know if it's correct to say it's a world, but the region is there. Yes, the dear leader is dead, and all the things around it is there. It seems like it's fertile ground both for a sequel, but also for more book. Is that something you've considered? Well, I guess in this case, Bradley Buckmaster has considered, following up with more books in that same world, or could we hope for more games? Perhaps a real-time strategy game in that world, in that setting.
I would absolutely love to do that. All I can say right now is we're pitching stuff that is in the Brigador universe, and if I can get the budget, then those possible games are going to include books and probably Makeup and Vanity Set, and I would love nothing more than to get the band back together, so to speak, and just keep going, because for most of us, this was kind of our, Brigador was Matt Pusty's first video game soundtrack. The Brigador book was Brad's first full-length book. It was my first game. And so, like, we were all, you know, and the audiobook was Ryan Cooper's first audiobook. So, like, it was a first for all of us for all of these different reasons. And, you know, there were struggles there, and there were things that we didn't do entirely right. But I think given what we had to work with, I think we did a great job. But obviously there's room for improvement, and I would love nothing more than just to be able to have everyone back together again to do it another time and to do it better. And, you know, maybe not take 5 years, but, you know, to keep going with this. Because, I love the universe we created with Brigador, and I want nothing more than to just keep working at it and to keep building on it and have this sort of, you know, like we didn't do a transmedia approach, to use the catchy term. We didn't do that just, like, it's very hard to do that and be profitable. We do it because we love the world and we want to provide as much of it as possible for those hardcore fans who, like, just want to be in there and want to immerse themselves. And yeah, like we'd love to do an art book and everything else. It's just a matter of with all these elements of just finagling the time and the budget for it.
May I please make a suggestion, Hugh?
Sure.
I have done some internet searching, and obviously I've read that Imager post, whatever have you, and you want to stay away from the Kickstarters and the producers and all that jazz. But the way you're talking now makes me think, you know, they've developed a game, they've made a game, it's got a 98% awesome rating on Steam from people that have reviewed and rated it. Why don't you go down the Kickstarter route and actually go ahead and say, right, well, we've made this game, you can see the proof is in the pudding sort of thing, here's the audiobook that you can obviously buy and all that jazz, this is what we've made, we want to move on with the development to make the universe of Brigador, you know, more awesome, more everything, so you guys can come and enjoy the fun with us sort of thing. But why don't you go down that route? I think you've got enough background, but enough you've learned from your mistakes. You haven't mitigated or blamed anybody else. You've taken all the mistakes from what I'm hearing, from where you talking to me and G, you've learned from all your mistakes. You know where you went wrong, and you've learned from that. So go down the Kickstarter route, and you won't be making the same mistakes again when you make Brigador 2, or Brigador the Second Coming, or Brigador's Brigade of Awesome, whatever have you, or Bacon, mind you, Bacon. You just do that, dude. It's to me, it's a no-brainer. But then again, Kickstarters, one of those things, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the kind of budget we need for a game, that's too big of an ask. But actually just doing a Kickstarter for a book, that, I mean, I hadn't considered that, and I think I will now.
Oh, just to jump in there, I have to say, if you do a Kickstarter for a book, I would assume it would be Bradley Buckmaster. Get hold of him, get him on here. We will do anything we can to make that a reality. And I have to say that because Eben will absolutely punish me if I don't offer it. We have your back.
I'll keep that in mind.
Our listeners will be there.
Yeah, because I'm currently talking with an author who's published by HarperCollins. Like, I'm doing my best to try and follow, because we self-published the book. Like, I registered the ISBNs myself. And what I'm trying to do right now is just get in touch with, like, because I want to get Brad an agent, and I want to get, like, kind of get his end more established so that, like, I would go crazy over having a physical book of the Brigador book, like, especially if it were like a nice hardcover book in black with like a red version of the skull and laurel on it. Like, I could feel the canvas right now. Like, that would be the greatest thing in the world.
There has to be a Buckmaster mech on it as well. Just if
of course
Buckmaster's writing it, there has to be a mech on it. I'm sorry.
That was one of my favorite parts about it, was that we basically ambushed him with that, because the Buckmaster mech was named after Brad Buckmaster before he was even doing any real writing for the game. He was just sort of hanging out in Twitch streams being like, those jerry cans wouldn't go there. They would be over here. You know, he was just kind of tacitly advising us. And so he actually was pretty influential on the design of the original Buckmaster, so we named it after him. And then he started playing the game, and we put the Buckmaster in the game, and of course it ended up being his favorite mech. And then he started writing the book, and it's like, okay, well, he ended up putting one of the characters in a Buckmaster mech, and it just like it worked out great, because he's one of the humblest guys I know, and he comes off as the consummate narcissist, because, you know, if you start reading Brigador, it's like, Brigador by Brad Buckmaster, and then so-and-so was in the Buckmaster mech, and it's just like, oh, really? You know, you're gonna... entirely
exactly
self-absorbed
the
as a
feeling.
writer.
Just what a reader sees. Or listens to, in my case, is going, wait, wasn't that the name? Wow, he's a narcissist.
So yeah, we still rib him about that occasionally, but it fit. So it worked out all right. And well, the other thing too is one of the characters is named Hugh, which, as like a return jab at me, he named a character after me, and it's the first character who shows up in the book. So of course, he got a little bit of payback.
To hear a developer geek out about his own fucking game just makes me wonder why you haven't done the Kickstarter thing sooner, or Indiegogo, or GoFundMe, or whatever. It's just so, again, just listening to you talk and listening for the past 5 minutes, you geeking out with G, dude, get on, make more, do more. This game is, do more, just do more, please.
Well, we are doing that right now. So we're split between a couple different things, but my focus right now, outside of doing business and stuff, is that we haven't officially announced it yet, but we're going to relaunch Brigador at the beginning of June. We're dramatically increasing the content, more vehicles, more levels. We're going to do a new campaign that's going to be sort of a much softer tutorialization of the game, and some other cool stuff that I can't announce yet. So I am still working on the game, making new content, and there's some other stuff in the pipe. And we are doing localization as well. So I can guarantee right now there's going to be German, Russian, and Japanese, and probably a handful of other languages as well. So there's plenty that's in the pipe. But after that, yeah, I want to keep going. It's just the problem with going to Kickstarter with a game is, like realistically, you need way more money than most Kickstarters ask for. And what a lot of them use that as is sort of a proof of interest amongst users. And you can parlay that into getting funding either from a publisher or from investors, etc.
That's where, for example, FIC comes in nowadays. Mm-hmm. Because Kickstarter has been run over by a lot of relatively low-budget games, whereas FIC then, you can show that you have users, and then they can go straight to FIC. The investors can go to FIC and actually support that directly. Yeah. So that's a more interesting setup, but less known, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I haven't ruled it out entirely. It's just I'm reticent to use a crowdfunding platform to fund a game, specifically just because, especially with how long our iteration times have been, you need that space and that isolation to figure out a lot of the groundwork before you start having to answer to people and to be like, okay, here's the situation, here's what we're doing now. I know how I work, and I know I would be either a terrible correspondent or I would be all consumed by corresponding with backers on that end. And so, I'm not saying we're never going to do a Kickstarter, but if we do, it's going to be much further into development, and it would be more like, okay, we know what we're making, and we've already built part of it. Now we just need help getting to the finish line.
I know I mentioned this recently in another interview with Shattered, some French people. They asked for 80,000 on Kickstarter. And the hard truth is, if you're looking at AAA development, that barely buys you 8 man-months. So 8 people 1 month, or 1 person 8 months. Kickstarters do not fund a full game. People should not expect that, but they do.
Yeah, and a lot of it's just a visibility thing.
Yeah, visibility is a big thing, as you've just there, but also Kickstarters can be a double-edged sword, Yeah, you get the money you want, and then the game doesn't come out, or you don't get enough, and the Kickstarter falls flat on its face, and then everyone's left unhappy, which isn't necessarily a good thing. So yes, double-edged sword, that.
Yeah. If we were to do a Kickstarter in the next year, what it would probably be is, obviously I would need to talk with Brad and Matt about this and Ryan, but I would be like, yeah, all right, here's a base amount. If you back this, you get the book. And then if we can stretch goal, then it's X amount is going to be an audiobook, and another X amount is going to be music from Makeup And Vanity Set for the audiobook, or possibly just like an entire complimentary album for it. Because I would love to keep kind of roping in all these other elements, so it's like, you're not just doing a book, you're doing all of these things together, and I think that could be a real, because that's how the way I see Brigador, for me personally, it's a game, and that's how I'm always going to be interfacing with that universe, but I would love to just provide that as this framework for other people to do cool work. And that was we gave Brad Brad had almost no oversight on writing the Brigador book. Like, his pitch to us was, it's gonna be about some oilists who get their shit wrecked. A lot of people die and it's really violent. And we were just like, yeah, I'm ready. And like, outside of asking us about kind of continuity, he was, it is entirely his baby. And that's how I always want to work with collaborators, is like, I'm not going to micromanage you. Like, I want to make sure that you are telling a Brigador story or writing something that fits within that framework. But beyond that, it's yours. And that's been my experience with Brad. That was my experience with Matt doing the music. And I hope if we are graced with having future collaborations, that's how we continue to work.
So 2020, we will see a Netflix TV series in the Brigador.
You're damn right.
Oh, that would be awesome. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm kind of in love with the world because of both the audiobook, because of all the lore you put into it. And it's so freaking amazing seeing an indie game that is so filled out in this regard.
Thank you.
You said people don't buy books. My bookshelf would disagree on the whole gaming books. But I've been lucky and got some fairly good ones.
Right.
There needs to be more of this, and there needs to be more of this game, because I really like this game. Bamm, if I may point out one thing that has amazed me in this interview, Hugh just said they're going to add a lot more content, and you didn't start screaming about adding bacon content.
Trying to behave here, G. Trying to behave. I don't want to upset poor Hugh here. I've been dying to ask him, please make a mech called Bacon for the love of God. But I'm trying not to be the usual retard for once. For once.
I appreciate the restraint. You can make bacon, though, if you hit civilians with lasers. So, just pointing that out. It is already viable within the game. Yeah, I don't know. This sort of multifaceted approach is how I would prefer to keep working within games. Because like I at the end of the day, I don't want to just make cast-off, like one-off things, right? And it's part of the reason why we took so long to make Brigador, is that we wanted to make something that was different, that that gave something novel to people purely from the game itself, but also that we were building something that had an appeal that went beyond just a game. And that's why we spent all this time in pre-production kind of fleshing out the world. And like we wanted it to not be a video game world, if that makes sense. We wanted to make a world that was interesting, that happened to also have a video game that takes place there. And I think that, if I can indulge myself with saying that we were successful in that regard, I think a lot of that is attributable to the fact that we used that approach. The world of Brigador, to a limited extent, existed before I had even... before we had the name, before a lot of the core elements of the game even existed, we were coming to this understanding of what that world was.
That's probably a healthy approach, because I remember a few games where, yeah, they had the basis of the world, but not necessarily much of the story around the world, the timeline or anything. They didn't have a Bible going into the world. And that's a TV movie production thing. You make a Bible before you make the story.
It's a thing you do in games as well. The problem is just it's extremely time intensive, and especially with how experimental you have to be with games, unless you're iterating on a very known and established genre. You can spend all this time developing a world, and then it turns out that the game you end up making doesn't fit in that world at all, which means you either end up shoehorning the world, or you shoehorn the game, or you just throw out all the work you did on the world and, start from scratch. So that approach is risky, which is also why it's risky, expensive, and time intensive, which is why it's not common to see that. But I think qualitatively, it's how you get some of the most interesting work.
Yeah, it's probably more in case when you have sequels and you have a somewhat new team making the second game, things that weren't written down about the world, but was communicated by the game, might be changed in the sequels. So the sequels are set in the same world, but they change facts. And I know it's anal, but it's annoying when, this is a fact in the game world. Oh, in the sequel, it's no longer.
Oh, yeah. Continuity drives me up the wall. And for essentially like an archiving purpose, as part of all the work we're doing with localization and with what's going to be the re-release in June, our hope is to make a proper wiki for the game that's going to have like all the writing in the game accessible, but also just to archive all this stuff for our own purposes, because like there's enough work that's been done that we can't keep it all in our heads anymore. Like, I mean, to give you an idea, the book is 75,000 words, so about 200 pages. We did another 25,000 words in the game itself. And most of that, it's not storytelling. Most of that is, vehicle descriptions, world building kind of stuff. So that's another 70, 80 pages. So there's almost 300 pages worth of writing for the Brigador universe so far. And that's not even including all the visual work that's been done. So it's like there's already a lot that's there, and what we realize is that for our organization's sake, we actually have to like properly articulate this, even if it's just in internal documents, so that we have this guide going forward.
Bamm, anything else from you?
Actually, to be brutally honest, G, looking on Steam for that Brigador book so I could buy it and listen to it.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. If you want to get it standalone, if you want to get the audiobook standalone, well, I gave you guys keys, right?
Yeah, I have a key. Theoretically, I could copy out the MP3s.
Bamm, if you didn't get a key, just let me know and I can send you one. Because right now we have this weird thing where, because of how Steam structures stuff, you can't buy DLC for a game unless you own the game. So the keys I gave you guys include both the game and the audiobook. Because right now, the only place you can get the audiobooks as a standalone is on itch.io. And because of a snafu there, right now it's only the first half of the audiobook and part of the soundtrack. I should have that updated within the next week or so. They had certain size caps because we did a 2.5-hour soundtrack and a 7.5-hour audiobook. I needed to get special permission from them to upload these massive zip files.
Where did you say this was?
Itch.io, itch.io.
Okay.
It's a new, small game front online retailer. I know the guys who built it. But so like Brigador's on there. It just we have old versions of this stuff because I haven't the pipeline for updating it. But I'll get that updated imminently. But yeah, otherwise just use the Steam key I gave you to activate it on Steam, and in your music library, the full soundtrack and the audiobook will show up.
The only issue I've got is that my laptop, one I had, decided to let out the electrical pixies and blue smoked me. So all I've got is a PS4 and a phone. So I'm probably gonna have to go to that IHTC place and purchase the actual audiobook standalone. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, man. Now that I think about it, we should come up with some other way for people to gain access to that. Because
our audio guy has said he wanted it on Audible or something similar.
Yeah,
or iTunes.
I can probably get it on there. My reticence with putting it on Audible is that Audible, if you have a non-exclusive distribution with them, which is what we'd have by necessity because it's already on Steam, if you have a non-exclusive distribution deal with them, they take 75% of the cut.
Ouch.
So, yeah, they rake you over the coals. But because they're embedded with Amazon and because they're the big dog, they can dictate that. And maybe if we were working with a proper book publisher, we might be able to negotiate a better deal. And I'm guessing that's the case, that there are much more favorable setups with, if we were with like HarperCollins or something, but we're not. So, but yeah, that might be something worth following through on my end. We'll see. But yeah, I can, I'll just email you a download link, and that'll save you some time.
You, sir, are a man and a scholar. Thank you very much. I was more than willing to pay for this audiobook standalone, but if I'm going to get a link, I'll take the link. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Definitely worth it. I should probably mention, I saw it on Amazon as well as an ebook, so...
Yes, yeah, the ebook is there, but there's the audiobook.
Oh yeah, but for people who like to read as opposed to listen, personally, that's more my style.
Mm-hmm.
It's there, it's also worth it. I understand that it's a little bit different. I noticed... Bradley somewhere said he preferred people buy that one because it gives him more publicity or something.
Oh, so that's the thing is the deal we made, and this is how I would always like to work with collaborators, is that if you buy the Brigador book on Amazon, all that money goes to Brad. And same, if you buy the soundtrack, you can buy the Brigador soundtrack directly from Matt Pusti on his Bandcamp. He gets all of that, and we were happy making that deal because, like, at the end of the day, Brigador isn't their baby. Like, this was ours, and they're contributing to it, but they should get the fruits of their labors in that regard. And so, yeah, if people are buying stuff on Steam, if they're packaging it all together, that's going to us, and that's how we recoup some of the costs of employing them. But if you buy directly from them, and if you want to support Makeup And Vanity Set or you want to support Brad, just buy directly from them. And all that, like, we don't get a cut of that. It just goes straight to them, and that's how I would prefer it, because that's, I want those guys to do well in their own right.
Well, it's been 20 years since I last had a turntable, so the vinyl is not an option for me, at least.
I don't have a turntable either, but a good buddy of mine does. So anytime Matt releases an album, I buy it on vinyl and then give it to my friend as a gift.
Nice. Okay, should we, we're actually half an hour over. We're supposed to keep these at 1 hour. Oh, Eben's gonna kill us. Should we wrap?
Chat, dude. It's a good chat. I'm sorry, G. I don't care what Eben says. It's a good chat.
Absolutely. Bamm, I'll kind of leave it to you now, if there's any human-centric parts, and then do the final question.
No, believe it or not, Hugh's actually been very annoying for me, since you do the technical, in-depth numbers and figures, something that I can't live with because it's boring as hell. I do the humanitarian sort of social side of things. Hugh's actually inadvertently answered every single bloody question I'd asked. So there's no point in me asking a question that he'd already answered. And then, everyone going, catching trying to chase their own tails and, trying to catch themselves. So, well done, Hugh, for ruining my part of the interview. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a problem, is just when you like the sound of your own voice, you'll just keep talking, whether anyone wants to hear you or not.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at the list of questions
all I have
here.
to know. Really, to be honest, I learned a lot today. There's a game out there that I didn't know until earlier this week that reminds me of Red Alert 2 and again, Tiberian Sun. And fuck, I haven't seen games like this for ages. And for me, the 90s sort of style games with the music and everything, it's just perfect. Hugh, thank you for making the game, dude. I'm gonna go get me that book, thanks to one of your links. And I'm gonna go listen to that book, dude. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for having me.
Bamm, your question? The last one?
No, G, my good man. I believe I asked the last one. You are contractually bound, sir, to ask this question, might I add. So please, sir, if you don't mind, ask away.
Okay, Hugh, as always, apologies about this question, as Bamm said. Apparently I have to ask it every single time. But now that we heard a lot about you, your game, the people you worked with, there's one more thing we need to know about you.
Uh-huh.
What kind of bacon do you like? How do you like your bacon? And besides really cheap American so-called beers, what kind of drink do you enjoy with your bacon?
Well, I like, actually, I don't like it super crisp. I like it a little bit chewy, thicker, like a hickory smoked, but like one that you can, because most American bacon is actually like, it's really thin, and oftentimes I find it's overcooked. I guess I like mine more like a jerky, where it's thicker cut, really smoky, and if you drop it, it doesn't shatter like glass. And as far as beer goes, I'm a huge fan of German, like Pilsners, lagers. I like really crisp, light beers, which is very hard to find good ones in the United States, which is why I need to just go back to Europe for a while. Yeah, anything like I just need to go for Oktoberfest and then pass out somewhere, because, yeah. The only thing I can really get here is just like Czech bar or Pilsner or Kel, German or Eastern European, those kind of lighter, crisp stuff. That's my cup of tea, or cup of beer, or stein of beer.
Well, I would say Pilsner is a Czech thing, not a German thing. But Germans might kill me for that.
Hey, if it's good, I don't give a shit.
But the hickory smoked bacon, I can join you in that one, definitely.
If you ever get a chance, Hugh, try an IPA beer, an Indian Pale Ale. I haven't had one yet that's disappointing, right? I really didn't think IPAs would be that good, but even the cheap stuff is actually pretty damn tasty. So try an IPA. That might help you along the ways, might be your crutch until you get to a country that makes good beer.
Yeah.
Well, I can say, since you're in the US, Brooklyn Brewery, if they're still around, it's been a decade for me since I was there, they do a pretty good, both a pale ale and an Indian pale ale. I would suggest starting with a regular pale ale, work your way up to the Indian one, because it's more robust.
Well, yeah, I actually live above a bar, so that's, I'm actually getting thirsty just talking about it.
Ooh, good thing I don't do that anymore.
It was my present to myself for shipping Brigador. So here's the thing. Brigador never would have been finished if I lived above a bar during development. But we shipped in June, and I moved in August. And so now instead of living on the outskirts in a cheap apartment, I live in a cheap apartment above a bar that I spend about half my free time in. So that's just how it worked out.
Well, I remember the time when I was just working with another mate and programming a lot. Yeah, that was literally a bar we referred to as the office.
Yeah. All right, guys. Speaking of, I might actually pop down for a brew. So,
Hugh, it was awesome having you on. I really enjoyed the game. I enjoyed also all the stories, all the not always positive stories around it, your experiences, etc. To anybody listening, look at the game at least. I can recommend buying it. I don't know why, but on Steam when I've looked, it's cheaper to buy the game and then the DLC than the package one. It's normally not the case.
yeah, we had a snafu with the Steam pricing because you can't change it during sales or like within a certain proximity. So that I don't know if we got that resolved yet, but that is something that we worked on.
Yeah. Also, if you're just curious, I know if you go to Amazon, there's the ebook. You can look at a couple pages so you can get a feel for how it's written. Makeup and Vanity Set can preview some of the music. So there's a lot of material around this game. Go and check it out. And if it looks interesting, back it because it is actually a good game. And we want to see more stuff in the world of Brigador.
Hell yeah.
And from me, guys, Bamm Havoc, love all you to pieces. I'll see you guys in the next interview. Thank you for listening to us for an hour and a half. Eben, we love you. Bye.